Great to be back with you guys after a 2-year absence. As was noted, I got blocked by a hurricane last year. Coming in from Florida, it's kind of a thing that happens on the Gulf Coast, so my apologies on that, but I was able to dial in and do that remotely. Before I begin, I guess everybody in here is, by show of hands, anybody interested in learning about the railroad? Yep. That's good showing. That's good showing. First, before I start, I would say it was just a joy to be able to listen to Sam Crofts up here talking on the panel. He and formerly with Senator Lee's office before he moved over to the Senate Committee for Energy and Natural Resources, over the last 2 years, going through this whole governmental process, guys like Sam have been just absolutely instrumental in moving this project forward. I think it's been wonderful to have folks in the state of Utah working for your representation, like Sam, who has really been just a true advocate and highly supportive of helping us get through the past 2 years in particular, since I basically was last here to visit with all of you and talk to you about the project. Roughly right about 2 years ago, we got hit with the adverse court decision in the D.C. Circuit. And I remember sitting up here at this rostrum talking to everyone saying, we were going to be committed to seeing this through. I think a lot of people here in the Basin thought that the rail project had basically been killed through environmental opposition and through the court process. I always call it, death by 1,000 paper cuts. And during the Biden administration, much of what was set up here and articulated by the panel, really kind of comes and rings true. During the previous 4 years or the 4 years of the previous administration, that was really the design, was opponents of infrastructure build out and advancement in our society, whether that be roads and bridges or railroads or pipelines or terminals or airports for that matter. I mean, the use of NEPA to stranglehold and thwart progress in this country, was a real serious problem. And, we obviously got caught up in the middle of that. And, I told you guys 2 years ago that we were committed on seeing this through. This is the first railroad project, or the first railroad to be built in 50 years. I always thought it was very interesting that, NEPA was passed, the National Environmental Policy Act was passed roughly 50 years ago. And opponents have been using that legislation and that policy to basically death by 1,000 paper cuts and slow roll you and try to kill projects like such as ours. So, we really feel that the potential of this region and this part of the country was so immense and so great. And seeing for years the cyclical boom and bust of the oil industry based on commodity prices and the markets that had a singular economic resource trying to articulate the impact, the economic prosperity of the people of Northeast Utah and the Rocky Mountain West, that opportunity was being thwarted by, in essence, bureaucratic slow rolling. And it was, I thought, vitally important for us to go and fight this fight. And I know Jay Johnson, who was our attorney at the Supreme Court, he's going to come up here after me, and Keith Heaton, who runs the 7 County Infrastructure Coalition. And by the way, as a public partner, the 7 County Infrastructure Coalition has been an amazing partner to work with, not just since we started working on this project back in May of 2019, but when the rubber met the road, Keith and I really locked arms, and our staffs really came together in order to fight this good fight that ultimately, back May 29th of earlier this summer, worked out for the best, I think, for the interest of the American people. And so, we're immensely proud to have picked up the baton and carried the flag forward and charged that hill that needed to be charged, which was to roll back these NEPA abuses and get us to a point where we can actually now move this project forward and go build a railroad. But for many years, having been around this project, everybody in this room primarily is involved in the, oil and gas industry. The industry, it's important for us to be able to drill for oil and gas and bring it to market. But what this industry provides, it's 1/5 of the United States economy is energy. But what does energy do? Energy provides the electricity ultimately, or refined products that make your life better, and allows industry to be able to run and operate. For us to be able to, you need base load electrical power to be able to turn these lights on and power this microphone, and for all of us to do what we do in life, which is to move about the world and conduct our lives. And that commodity, and particularly the natural gas, is just so vitally important to being able to create, a base load energy source that's going to allow and facilitate other industries, not just refineries, but other industries that need to grow and need to have a way to exist. And in the last 2 years, as we've been fighting this fight in the Supreme Court, things have changed a lot in this country. Obviously, elections have consequences, so we've had a lot of political changes, but we've also had a lot of changes in our global economy. And one of the things that we are, I can't remember the philosopher that once said, may you live in interesting times, right? We basically are living in today's society similarly to kind of what folks that were living in the 1840s and 1850s were doing when the advent of the Industrial Revolution came about. If you ask somebody in 1845, hey, will you ever drive in an automobile? They'd ask you, well, what's an automobile? They had no concept of what that is. What are steel mills? Why would we build skyscrapers and need steel, right? And pioneers like Andrew Carnegie, who created U.S. Steel, and J.D. Rockefeller, who created, Standard Oil, and they fueled the ability for industry to create a better life for the global economy. So whether you live in Pakistan or you live in Alabama or Utah or Brazil, doesn't matter. You use energy and you use the advents of the Industrial Revolution to make your life better. We're sitting on the precipice today of an AI, artificial intelligence revolution. But what that needs is energy. You can't run data centers. You can't manufacture NVIDIA's, every 9 months they come out with a brand new chip that powers, your newest cell phone or server farm that is crunching through these AI, new burgeoning technologies. And you need energy to do that. And so, as I was sitting here talking, looking at Sam Crofts and having dealt with him so much in D.C. over the last 2 years, this last 2 years we've seen just such a fast development of AI in Silicon Valley and what that is doing to our global economy. And those of us, I'm Gen X, almost 52 years old. AI to me is something I really can't quite explain how it all works and how the buttons and little facets work, because our generation is a little bit slower to learn those kind of things. But I can tell you I've got 2 kids that are freshmen in college right now, and they use AI all the time. Law offices, you're probably not going to, Jay Johnson's probably not going to need a whole lot of paralegal support going forward, because AI is going to do a lot of that. Our industries and our lives, AI is going to robustly change how we conduct our lives. And as we sit here, I've sat with Sam and others in D.C. often over the last 2 years. And as I talked about, elections have consequences. A little less than a year ago, we had a new president elected. And about, 7-8 months ago, he came into office. And the pace at which this administration is affecting change that is going to power and facilitate the powering of this new economy has been at breakneck speed. I think he's 78 or 79 years old. Our president is running at such a fast pace. I don't know where he gets it from, but he and his staff are changing things so quickly that industry is trying to keep up and stay ahead of the curve, and that's saying something for Silicon Valley, because they're pretty dynamic in the way they change. But I say all this as a predicate to the underlying opportunity that here in the Uinta Basin provides. And in my direct conversations with the Energy Dominance Council at the White House, with the Presidential Task Force for Environmental Quality, and the task force that this White House has put forward to fast-track permit and get some permit reform and fast-track permitting to where they, folks like us can go out and build railroads and bridges and airports and pipelines and whatever needs to happen. This White House is 110% committed to opening up markets. And it's primarily because they see what's gone on over the last 50 years and the influence that other nations have to our collective security. If you've been paying attention to the news last 6-7 months, you've seen all these executive orders that have come out, and they've been all really articulated towards, number one, securing energy dominance and security of American energy independence, but also self-reliance. And they want the United States to be able to stand on its own 2 feet and to reconstitute our industrial strength and might that we once had, which made us the victors of World War II and put us in a position, 80 years ago to be the leader of the global world. That policy, the loss of that industry, the loss of that dominance, and the reliance that we've had to have on places like China does not sit well with this president. And it does not sit well with this Congress. And so they've been making and taking steps in which to effectuate change, to be able to reshore industry, in order to reshore technology, to be able to have American companies and American investors and American workers be able to own these jobs and own these technologies and be able to control our own future. So from a national security standpoint and an economic security standpoint, this has been very, very important for this White House to effectuate this types of change. And to that effort, we've been working hand in hand with them to try to get this railroad built, because they understand that this railroad unlocks the greatest sources of energy that we have in this country and in this world. Not to use my figures, the U.S. Geologic Survey, you can type on the U.S. Department of Interior and go look at the U.S. Geologic Survey. The Green River Formation holds 1.32 trillion, with a T, trillion barrels of hydrocarbons, of shale hydrocarbons. It's the largest shale reserves in the world. And when I had that conversation with the folks in the White House, they were shocked. They were, wow, our government. They looked it up and they're like, yeah, you're right. We are sitting on this tremendous energy source. And to them, that means that we're able to bring in these AI data centers and new technologies and rare earth refinement, and to be able to control and reconstitute American industry. And they want to bring it to this part of Utah because we are sitting on such a great pool of natural resources. So with that, I think we are poised to see the Uinta Basin and to see Northeast Utah have a very transformative and positive effect on not just the local state economy, but the United States economy and the United States energy and national security. I think it's very exciting. Like I mentioned earlier in my comments about the Industrial Revolution, and someone that was sitting in 1845 before the railroads started to crisscross the country, and we started to develop all the industry that we kind of take for granted today. That's where we're sitting today. You're sitting in front of that wave, and it's going to happen. And places like the Uinta Basin are going to be the epicenters of seeing new power production, new data center production, new fiber optics networks, new technology that's going to come in here, and it's going to change the lives of so many millions of people across not only the country but the globe. So I say that all, and I hope most everybody in here looks at that as a good thing, because I think it's a pretty buoyant message. It's a pretty buoyant set of events. And if you would have asked me 2 years ago how I felt about the way things were going, getting hit by a DC Circuit opinion that was adverse to us, and having to kind of crawl through the desert and look for the oasis of hope in that. I would have said that it looked kind of bleak 2 years ago. But sometimes things change when you hold on and you have a vision and you know what you're doing is right and you believe in your country's future and you understand from a logical sense why this place makes sense and how it fits into the importance of our collective future as a people and as a nation. You look at the exciting future that's going to happen here over the next coming decade as it grows, and everybody in this room has a part to play in that. And so I can tell you the president, you're going to see some actions coming out of the White House in the near future. Jay Johnson's going to come up behind me, I think, and educate you all on the legal process and where this case is. I don't want to steal too much of his thunder in explaining how we came out of the Supreme Court like the last day of May, and most people think that that's just kind of, oh, it's over, we're going to go now build the railroad. We still have a little bit of a bureaucratic process to see our file get returned and remanded back to the Surface Transportation Board so our permits can be actually reinstated. But at least we know the outcome. We know what the process is going to be. It just takes a couple weeks, couple months to allow the bureaucracy to kind of move its way through the system. But with that, we're so proud of having fought this fight. We're so excited to build this railroad because what it does is it allows the ability for us to move manufactured products out of here, move minerals and resources in that need to be, the Apples and the Nvidias and the Metas of the world. They need that stuff in order to manufacture the new cell phones, the new cyber glasses, the new whatevers that these really smart kids in Silicon Valley come up with. That stuff is going to be transported in on this railroad, and those products are going to leave this community on that railroad. We're also obviously extraordinarily happy to move crude oil to the Gulf Coast and have refiners take that out, but there's so much more to this railroad than being just a crude oil carrier. And to that, I also want to let everybody know, those that know the Haslams in this town, they run BHI. You may have seen some work going on over at Asphalt Ridge, the refinery that was originally designed for processing of tar sands. We are taking control of that refinery, and we're refurbishing it and restarting it. It'll be up online processing Uinta yellow wax. We signed back in May it's now publicly available, so I can tell you about it. But we signed a JV contract with Shell. And so Shell is going to be providing the crude oil and then taking the refined products out of Vernal. And we will be refining new refined products. So it's going to be another great opportunity for producers to be able to sell that local derived wax, Uinta waxy crude into a local market, which is going to be able to pay a better net back because there's less transportation costs transporting it within the basin versus out of the basin. So we're excited to be bringing economic solutions that are going to put traffic on this railroad that not only gets it done from a financial and a construction standpoint, but also is tied to the burgeoning future of our country and bringing all this new economic development. Because it's not like a pipeline where it's designed to just move oil or a fluid through. It can be looked at as like a rolling pipeline, but it's a common carrier railroad that will transport everything and anything. So with that, I'm very happy to be here with you today. I'd be happy to take any questions and talk about the future of Vernal and the Uinta Basin and how this railroad's going to help make this place a better place to live and work.